Everybody. You are hopefully all here to participate in this seminar to share our brand new research project on pooling budgets and self-directed support. My colleague Danielle Farrell has been the one who has been leading on this research project. Do you want to say a wee quick hello, Danielle?
Hi everyone, it's nice to see faces that I recognise, but also new faces as well.
Excellent, thanks so much. And I'm just really here to do the welcome and the NCing, and we've got a couple other folk from the In Control Scotland team whose faces you might recognise from our wee slide up here. But for those who don't know, In Control Scotland is a small charity. There's just 6 of us, and we work collaboratively to try and improve social care. We've been funded by Scottish Government as a national partner in self-directed support improvement for many years, and this particular piece of research was part of our work in that policy area. So we are funded as part of the National Self-Directed Support Improvement Plan, and flexibility in budgets and pooling budgets was one thing that we wanted to dig into in a wee bit more detail. So I'll just hand over to yourself, Danielle, if that's all right, and you can hold the floor. Sorry, I can't see folk who are sharing slides.
Hi everyone, I'm hoping you can see and hear me okay. I'm one of those people that had a panic with Teams right before we started, so I'm hoping all is good now. But thanks for joining today. It's nice to see so many of you here. But as Pauline said, we're here to talk about the research that I've been conducting for the last few months on behalf of In Control Scotland. So I'm sure many of you on the call will remember the time when self-directed support was enforced in 2013, when everybody was really excited about this new piece of legislation that was going to make such a big difference to social care. And I'm sure many of you on the call will agree that perhaps that hasn't happened in the way we would have hoped. So this research looks at pooling budgets, but it came off the back of research that I was part of conducting last year when we spoke to support providers about their experiences of option 2 of self-directed support. Some of you may or may not have read that report when we published it probably about this time last year-ish. And one of the recommendations from that report that was published around option 2 was that the participants had said quite clearly as part of the focus groups that they wanted to find out how flexibly people could use their budgets, and pooling budgets is part of this. So in terms of the statutory guidelines, just to set the scene a bit for anyone who isn't as familiar, in the guidelines it says that pooling of budgets should be the choice of and controlled by the supported person and carers or carers, if that's the case, and that it should be used as a way of combining resources and approaches at every stage in the support during a person's pathway. So it should also use common approaches and combine resources, and really work well for the person or the people involved, like all parts of SDS should in that great piece of legislation that we have. But like all the other parts of self-directed support, we know that unfortunately it doesn't always work out that way, but we wanted to find out why it works when it works, and why it's not been offered as an option, and what would need to be in place for it to be offered as an option. So that's laying a little bit of the groundwork in terms of setting the scene for you guys. So then we have, who did I talk to? I talked to a lot of people, and I'm quite glad to say that there was, in some of the interviews, there was more than one person from an organisation. So I took comfort in the fact that people actually wanted to talk about it. It might not have been happening in the area, but they were keen to find out more about the research and where it was happening, how were they managing to do it, and then to come, when they found out they could come along to something like this or read the paper that's now been published, then that was, I sort of, what was the word, a sort of carrot for people to get involved, because people want, as I'm sure we can all agree, we want to make this better, we want to get it right. 10 years down the line, maybe we hope that that we wouldn't need to work so often at getting it better, but hey, I suppose that's why we're all here, because we all work around it. So it would put us out of a job if we didn't need to work around it. So yeah, people were keen to talk to me. So I spoke to 31 people all in 17 organisations. These included local authorities and SDS leads, support providers, people supporting unpaid carers, and independent support organisations. I wouldn't say there was one area of the country that participated more than others. There was, unfortunately, maybe a gap in talking to supported people who maybe pulled their budgets, but then again, that also highlighted the fact that this wasn't happening as much as maybe we would have hoped. The fact that I couldn't find many supportive people who were willing to talk to me, so that was a indication in itself. So if we go on from there to who I spoke to the questions we asked, and for those of you that have maybe had the chance to look at the published paper on the In Control website, you might already know some of these questions, but I'm also aware it just got published yesterday, so it really is hot off the press. I apologise if you feel you've already read some of this for yourself, but I feel it's important to set the scene and tell you why we're here, why we've got to this point today. So the questions we asked, I asked was, is the pulling of budgets offered as an option across Scotland? Is there or can you give a variety of examples around the pulling of budgets and how this can be used? Do local authorities have the pulling of budgets outlined in the direct payment agreements, or is there a separate agreement? Are support providers frequently pulling budgets with the people they support, and if so, how do they manage this? How are budgets being used flexibly when they are pulled? What needs to be put in place to enable the pulling of budgets to be used more frequently with self-directed support? What is required in terms of the framework around the pulling of SDS budget? What needs to change? And are there any specific policies and procedures already in place around this area? If not, is this something that needs to be put in place? So these were the specific research questions, but in order to get the information, the right information, or the information we needed to answer these questions from the different groups, I was also aware that there was maybe some different ways of asking these questions. So, for example, I might have asked something different of a carers organisation to what I would ask a local authority, and such like, just so that we could get the right data and the right level of data, I guess, to be able to answer some of these questions, because everybody has a different role to play. Everybody that I spoke to in all the different groups has a different experience of this. So although these are the main questions, how I obtained the data meant I asked them slightly different depending on the person or the organisation that I was speaking to at the time. So feel go on from the questions to look at some of the learning themes, and I think this is probably why most of you are here today, to actually find out what the research actually found out. So I'm going to just cover some of that, and just so you're not overwhelmed by all the themes at once and listening to me talk about each one of them while they're all up on screen, Pauline is going to bring them each up one by one, and I'm just going to talk a little around each. So limited data was number one, and the knowledge, also limited knowledge and confidence in how this can affect the uptake of SDS pooling budgets. So the barriers were quite clear from the outset, whether I was talking to, for example, carers organisations or local authorities. Everybody was quite clear. Again, their experiences may have it wasn't that they may have differed, they did differ maybe slightly, but the main barriers were the same, and they were either systematic barriers, attitudinal barriers, or administrative barriers. And it became quite clear from talking to people, as I'll talk about as we go on, that there is gaps in the pooling of budgets and how this is implemented across Scotland. But one of the themes that come out quite clearly, and I actually quoted this within the research, was that knowledge is power. So if people know what pooling budgets is all about, then they'll feel comfortable in doing it. But that was the point. The majority of people I spoke to didn't know, so then they then highlighted several gaps and several things that they would need to, for them, that would need to be put in place for them to either engage with engage with various organisations, or be able to support carers, or to be able to offer this within the local authority. So I've just pulled out, well, knowledge is power was a quote, but just to sum up how people were feeling about it, one interviewee from a local authority felt that it was sometimes, not all the time, just to emphasise that, but it was sometimes admin and finance procedures that dictated some of these things, and not what was best for the person. So just highlighting that despite the purpose of the legislation, sometimes the person centredness, I suppose, goes, and systems take over and they become paramount in the process rather than the people. I actually, another quote was that somebody mentioned that social workers only get a very little time to study and to spend around self-directed support. So often they feel like a duck out of water, and I'm sure there's a lot of you on the call today that's heard that so many times, because I know us at In Control Scotland, it's something we hear a large part of the time, despite the fact that self-directed support is how social care should be implemented in Scotland. So if we move on to the
Can I ask a wee
of
follow-up
course,
question
Pauline,
just before you move on? Just want to pick up, because one of the things I thought was dead interesting in this piece of research as well was about the data collection side of it too. And I wondered, that's something that we found in our research in previous years, and also the post-legislative scrutiny inquiry found that data collection around STS wasn't great. And I just wondered if you wanted to say a wee word or two about how that reflected in pool budgets as well.
No problem. Yeah, it was exactly the same, and I think I know for a fact that was also highlighted in the report when I did ask for if local authorities, for example, had data. A lot of the answer was, I don't know, and even those who did say, oh well, maybe we do have some data, but I don't know how extensive it is. For example, there was nothing around specific pooling budgets, so those that did have any sort of data, it was more generic as in SDS. But even as you've just highlighted there, Polly, even by asking that question, even that in itself is so limited. So yeah, it was echoed again in this research.
Brilliant, thank you.
Does anybody else have anything they want to ask at that point, just because Pauline's asked a question?
We'll do space at the end as well, yeah.
Okay, there will be space at the end, but just in case anybody had a burning question that they wanted to ask. Examples are limited, but there is much to learn. I think that's something that maybe we're all familiar with in lots of different areas of research. But out of the under this theme, I was looking at the positive examples that people gave, because there was some pockets of positive experience around building budgets, and it would be the research wouldn't be valid if we didn't look at the examples, however small. So out of all the interviews that I conducted, there was only 9 positive examples of pooling budgets, and these examples came directly from support providers. As I say, I didn't get a chance to speak directly to a person who was pulling a budget with someone else, but I had a few examples that were given from providers. One example that was given was that a supported person and the carer decided to pull their budget and employ a living carer who would alternate with another carer every 2 weeks. So for this family, this worked in the sense that it gave the carer a break from their role as a carer, but it also gave consistency to both the carer and the cared for person, because they were comfortable with the two people that alternated to provide that care. So they had a really positive relationship, and for them that worked really, really well. But some of the other examples that we've got this research gave us to learn from was that PA recruitment. This was a really this was really high in some people's agenda, and I guess this is about more about pooling resources as opposed to pooling budgets, but it was something that was really come out quite significantly in some areas, particularly in rural areas, where perhaps people were so maybe a family, for example, had a small budget, maybe for a few hours a week, and that made it difficult to find a PA. But actually, if they could find another family local who had a supported person with similar interests, similar needs, and actually they could employ one PA to help both families, for example, that wasn't quite pulling budgets because each family employed the PA separately, but it's just another example of how people can pool resources, and another way, something else you can learn from, because that wasn't something for me personally I'd heard of a lot in terms of pulling resources and making it work for people. And the other thing that came out quite clear was that people were suggesting that for those who might want to consider pulling budgets, one of the challenges might be who becomes who's the employer. Because, for example, if two people are employing them on PA, who's responsible to have those conversations if things aren't maybe going so well, or there's a wee issues that we need to iron out? Who's responsible for that? And it was suggested that one way of getting around that would be to have an intermediary organisation. But what that flagged up with was what type of organisations would be open to taking on that responsibility. And I had a further conversation due to this being highlighted in the research, just to find out if that was something that had been put on our colleagues at Scottish Government's radar. And the response I got was pretty much the same, that they had never thought about that really, but the person I spoke to was kind of similar in her view, that she wasn't sure who would want to take on that responsibility of being an intermediary, but it was an interesting point to highlight. I noticed there's some comments coming up in the chat. I'm not sure if it's specifically around this, but Karen, is there anything that...
Yeah, Karen Albro's just popped a wee question. Do you want to just go for it, Karen?
Yeah, so do you know that way I'm as an unpaid carer, I'm getting myself in knots to try and work out how I can relate it back to my own situation to make advantage of the information I've got and make sure it works. So there's been a couple of situations where we've got funding from our local authority for community events, and they've ended, and I've said to other parents, can we all chip together? You've all got budgets sitting there unused. Can we all pool that money together and make it work? And essentially it's been knocked down by other carers who suggested that social work wouldn't bite. And social work, I already spoke to social worker number for it, but I'm getting myself confused as to if it's a group and if we've all getting the funding through having to achieve outcomes, or the funding comes from us having outcomes. How does the pooled resources work if everyone's got different outcomes? Do you just go to social work and kind of ensure there's a common theme that we can use those budgets? I'm getting myself tied up in loads of knots to try and make it work for us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think for a minute, Karen, that you're the only one that would get themselves tied up in knots, because even speaking to even organisations, they were getting themselves tied up in knots, even thinking about the prospect of how pooling budgets would work. But I think in terms of the people that I spoke to on the organisations, when we were talking about pooling resources, that was very much on the family on the families, at least initially, to be able to identify a PA and then say, well, we can only offer, I don't know, 3 hours, for example, and then to then be able to find a family who could maybe enhance that in terms of what they offer. But then you're quite right in what you're saying. You need a social worker or a practitioner who's open to having those kind of conversations, and then who's open and confident enough to then take that back to managers to then say, this is why and how it would work for these families. So again, I suppose it goes back to the first learning theme of having the confidence, but also for the practitioners, not just the local authorities as a whole, but practitioners, even if it's not something the local authority does, for the practitioner to then say, oh, I can see how that might help, but I'll need to go and argue that case. You know.
Yeah. Can I pitch in here as well? Just
Yeah.
because I think as well, this is what you're raising here, Karen, is something that probably ties into learning point 5, which is about overall flexible use of budgets. And I think there's this again takes, as Danielle said, takes confidence and knowledge to be able to kind of challenge the way that we might approach things like understanding what people's outcomes are in the first instance. I think what I've definitely seen in the last few years is often when outcomes are really prescriptive, that really inhibits flexibility in how you spend your budget. So if there's the example we used a lot during COVID, for example, was I'm going to use my budget. An outcome would be to go to the gym twice a week, right? And that's not an outcome. So the outcome is to feel fit and strong and healthy. And that's something that you can then apply flexibility to. But during COVID, when all the gyms shut, folk couldn't use their budget for it, for getting a treadmill or something instead, because their outcomes didn't lend themselves the way that they'd been written again in their support plan docs. So I suppose it's just something, it's probably indicative of a wider thing about how we can make outcomes as flexible as possible and not prescriptive. So that's definitely something that we've been doing a lot of development work on in the last few years as well, because we still see a lot of these outcomes which are really outputs listed on folk support plans or assessments. So very happy to have a chat with you after this, Karen, because spoiler alert, we're hoping to do some more development work on this next year. But yeah, these are live questions that folk are trying to kind of wrangle the answers to.
Danielle, Geraldine had another question in the chat. I don't know if you've got time for another one just now, or if you're taking questions at the end.
Probably easier to maybe go through them all first, and then people can be able to position their questions, because maybe one of the learning themes might change someone's question or whatever.
Oh, so sorry, I've lumped the two together when I've done my slides, so apologies. You're getting 3 and 4 in a oneer.
It's fine, thank you, Polly. So number 3, there is a need for guidance and tools to support pulling budgets. This again was something that was really significant throughout my discussions with various people, and it was that the existing information is limited, and as is the information in current direct payment agreements. I also did a little bit of desk research to see if or by what extent people or organisations, as in local authorities, namely, but predominantly, included information about pool budgets on the website. There wasn't any that was really apparent on anybody's website. So that is something that needs addressing. There was concerns around GDPR. So people were saying, because initially I asked people to elaborate on this when they brought this up, because I wasn't sure what they really meant by it. And actually what people were saying was, if 2 or more people, for instance, were pulling a budget, how is that going to work in terms of who knows what about each other, and like financial information about each person's account and sort of that type of thing, and people's personal details, even the PA's personal details, who manages that? Because if one person is employing a PA, that's fine, because that's just one agreement, if you like, but who holds this data, and how is it managed, and who can have access to it when, was sort of the understanding I took from that. And people talk quite openly about if pulling budgets was a regularly used option, there would need to be strong tools like person-centered plans in place, so that like you said, Karen, yourself there, that so that we were ensuring that the people's outcomes were met, because otherwise there's no point in pulling budgets anyway if people aren't getting what they want to get out of the agreement or out of what was put in place. So it was really clear that tools like person-centered planning would have to be put in place and engaged with, not just put in place, but actually engaged with, because I think we can all agree it's sometimes easy enough to say, yeah, there is a plan in place, but are we actually engaging with it and doing what it says in the plan? Doesn't always happen the way it should. So just to make sure that actually that is what's happening, is happening for everyone involved in the agreement, not just one of the people, because then that's where the danger, one of the dangers that it goes wrong. And number 4, support providers' experience offered the strongest insight. In this instance, yeah, that's not because support providers have a better knowledge. It was just that in the case of this research, support providers were one of the more willing groups of people to speak to me at the precise time that I was conducting the interviews. So of all the service providers that I spoke to, or support providers rather, 8 of them mentioned pooling budgets as an option they provide within the service provision, or as something that is regularly discussed within the organisation. A lot of the time, support providers were highlighting challenges they have around this, as well as what works well. So some of the challenges were misconceptions of staff, and one of the main misconceptions that they were referring to was the fact that staff were of the view that when they're supporting more than one person at a time, they should be paid twice. And this is not the case, because obviously that's the point of pulling a budget, so that all people involved in the agreement get the most out of the budget, and that wouldn't be achieved if staff were being paid twice. Another challenge that they had was invoicing separately, in terms of, so if it was multiple people, you don't just send out the one invoice, you have to then invoice each person separately for the part of the support that they're responsible for paying for. And then support providers also highlighted that when a shared budget agreement or a pool budget agreement, is working well. Often people are fearful of rocking the boat if they ask for a review, because actually it's working well, so they don't want to highlight this and then for local authorities to maybe think that something needs changed. But actually, as we all know, care packages or support or SDS budgets should be reviewed on a regular basis, even if it is just a check-in to make sure it's working. But because of this fear that people have, that is not always happening because of that.
Yeah, one of the things that I picked up on, sorry, I'm chipping in again, Danielle. One of the
Alright.
things that I picked up on this section as well, which I thought was really interesting, support providers have got more experience in doing this than most other groups that you spoke to. So one of the things that they picked up on as well, and it links to Karen's question about how do we do this in a way that meets everybody's outcomes, and they picked up as well on the risk of it being seen as a mechanism for cuts, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. People were worried about that exact point, Pauline, and one provider actually said that I'm sure all providers do this, but I'm just using this provider's example because they vocalised it. That they often have the conversation that, okay, for example, two people are pulling a budget maybe at tea time so that there's not two members of staff in the same kitchen making the same meal, but actually there's a need for these two people to have their individual budgets, because they are two individuals at the end of the day, and they have their own interests and their own activities that they want to go and do. So for example, one provider said a mother and son, and they have shared support or pool support at tea time, but actually do a mother and son want to be hanging out together all the time? Probably not, because they're very different people and they're at very different stages of life. So they need to, as a support provider, they felt at times have had to push that conversation to ensure that the individualised element is still there. And also another concern off the back of cuts was also the danger that we may go back to group living if we're thinking about this. And that was something that was brought up, I wouldn't say consistently, but it was quite a theme to be mentioned, that people would just assume that, okay, John, George and Michael have autism, so let's just, they'll just all do all the same things all of the time, and that's fine. And we all know that's not fine. So that's what people were concerned about in relation to your question.
Thanks, Danielle.
So flexibility can be variable, and again this relates to your question, Karen, around using budgets flexibly. So carers, then this finding that I've highlighted here that I'm just about to talk to you guys about came specifically from a carers organisation around the flexibility of budgets. So one carers organisation said that actually, even though carers are having assessments for their own budgets as carers in their own right, they're actually being told that they can only use their budgets for replacement care. So whilst you could argue that's giving them a break, so they can go off and do something for a couple of hours, it's not actually giving them money to, I don't know, go and, I don't know what somebody's interest might be, but go and buy some arts and crafts, or do some bead making jewellery and go and buy beads, or I'm just using some examples off the top of my head that I've heard from carers, or go out for a walk and maybe buy some proper clothing for that, or whatever their interest is, by using it to provide replacement care, that they're not getting a chance to do whatever they want to do as themselves. What is probably been highlighted in their assessment as a carer as their outcome. As Pauline said, we see it more often than not that is often outputs as opposed to outcomes and assessments. I've had it as a supported person, so we see that, and I'm sure using your budget for replacement care isn't an outcome for somebody. In fact, I know it's not. So yeah, that was just something that was clearly highlighted from a carers organisation's perspective, and so around that, somebody just said that carers have been told they have to use it for extra hours, or being told that they can use it for something they use.
I've just received notification on my son.
Karen, can you maybe mute folk if you haven't? Sorry, a wee bit of background noise.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Or the fact that people might have been told that they can't use their budget for something they were able to use it for the previous year. So it goes back to those inconsistencies that we've already highlighted. Replacement care might allow them to go to work or whatever they're looking to do, but obviously that's fine to a degree, but it's actually not, probably not, well, it's likely not to be an outcome assessed on the carer's assessment. So yeah, it's just, I guess that's highlighting the inflexibility in the budgets, and not specifically pulling of budgets, but over SDS budgets as a whole. Number 6, if you don't mind, Polly, is around the practical things that would make pool budgets a reality. So there was lots of these. So some practical examples where that more explanation is required for people to really trust and know what's involved in this. Because we already know that sometimes self-directed support is presented as a scary thing to people as it is, without adding another thing to be scared about within it. So more explanation is definitely required. Guidance similarly to the SDS guidance we already have, so but more specifically around pool budgets. Knowledge gaps and inconsistencies are something that's came up around what's available right now around pooling budgets. And one thing that was definitely apparent, I heard so many people say to me at the end of every interview, was, where can we go and learn from the people who are doing this? So we need to create a space for shared learning where people can go, and whether that's videos, whether that's focus groups, whether that's just as, I guess, a safe space for people to go in, kind of, sort of, even if it was sort of a lunchtime thing or something where people could go long quarterly even and have a chat about these things. These are the things that people are looking for, to give them the confidence to be able to perhaps eventually offer this as an option within SDS. Some of also, it was apparent that somebody said to me, and I've written this down under this part of my notes just because I felt it was important, that social care needs to be started right in the communities. there's no and this person went on to say there's no point in having boards and people to organise things if we don't have carers on the ground, and our strategic partners like the government and all that need to be instilling the virtues of a career in care, or as a self-employed PA as part of the as a career, not just. And that I know from working with a lot of you on the calls that we've been part of so many discussions around valuing the PA workforce, around how we make that better. And this person that I interviewed from a local authority was quite clear in that that's where it needs to start, and then we can talk about the things more specific, like pooling budgets. How do we use this flexibly? But for all those things to happen and happen well, we need to pull it right back again to the values and make sure that they're instilled in our communities going forward. So that covers the 6 key learning points. The recommendations from the research was that there was quite a few of them, and feel free to go on and download the report and read these for yourself after today if you haven't already. But there is a need for clear, co-produced guidance in key areas. Some of these examples are around financial management and accountability for employment and decision making. And if we did this, it's thought that we would reduce inconsistencies of the approach we've heard and increase confidence in offering pooling budgets. Our recommendation was around what I've just shared there, the need to gather and share positive examples of pooled budgets and to give practitioners and SDS budget holders the opportunity to learn from and share with others. The third recommendation was for local authorities to be consistent in all information they provide around SDS options, including pooling budgets. I think it's fair to say we've all probably heard that one once or twice before, and again it's just come up, but specifically around pooling budgets, and that local authorities should also publish and highlight this type of information more readily on their website. And number 4 was the option of having an employment intermediary should be explored further. The independent support would mean that PA employers have further support than they do currently around managing their role as a PA employer. And again, that subject of being a PA employer is something that there's so much work that's been going on and still going on around that to support both PAs and PA employers. So again, there would need to be further work done around pool budgets and supporting both those groups.
Thanks. So thanks so much, Danielle. I'm interjecting just now because this is the point at which we'll stop the recording. And